In this video, I'm going to talk about how to make the seat portion of a node chair. This is a one-piece molded plastic chair, and it's got some interesting surfaces that are all blended together. It's a little bit daunting at first because you have a blended arm into a seat back, the seat pan blends up into the seat back, and then you have a turn down lip on the front of the seat pan and a turned out lip on the top of the seat back. You also have this transition in this area where there's a notch that allows the armrest to be bent over and blended into the rest of the what I'll call the bucket shape of the seat. If I turn on the tangent lines and just show one half of the seat, we can see the surfaces that are going to be made to create this. The main bucket portion consists of a seat back that wraps around to become the arm area, a seat pan, a very large fillet that blends the two together, the surface for the lip on the top, the surface for the lip in the seat pan area, the armrest, and then finally a simple fillet that blends the armrest down into the rest of the seat back / arm area. As you can see from my feature tree, we'll start out with layouts and planes. We'll make what I call the basic bucket. The bucket is the back, this fillet, and the seat pan. We'll then add the seat lip, the seat pan lip that is, the seat back lip, this area, the armrest, and then finally we'll thicken it and add some fillets. So let's get started by rolling the feature tree back to the layouts. And I always, with a chair, like to start out with the side view layout because that seems to show the most in one view. So let's just roll back, starting with the side view. And I'll stress that you only need to add what is necessary in any one layout view. So in this view, we have the curve of the seat back, the curve of the seat pan, and this would be on the center line of the chair, and then just a crude sketch for what the armrest area looks like, and some dotted lines here representing the fact that I'm later on going to add in some blending, either fillets or curves. So in this area between the seat back and the pan, there's going to be a very large fillet blending those together. And when I cut out the arm area, I'm going to cut it out so that there's a big fillet here. This is just, in this case, to remind me that I'm going to add something there. It's not necessarily going to be exactly that shape. In the front area here, we see that the seat pan just keeps on going up, but I've also drawn in another curve. This is actually what's going to be the shape of the lip that turns downward. And I've done the same up here at the top of the seat back. The curve just continues up to this point, but then I've added this other curve that curls back to represent the lip on the top. I tend to overdo it a bit with all the dimensions, but once I've got dimensions in my sketches, it makes it a lot easier for me to tweak things down the road. I will, by the way, mention that none of these are real dimensions. I just did a lot of this by eye. I know that some of these are off by as much as 1 or even 2 inches, so please don't take this as any kind of data for your own chair. Rely on whatever measurements that you've made. Just from this one sketch, I can create a lot of different planes. I have a plane I'm going to put my front layout on, a plane at the very top, a plane at the very front, a plane for the front of the arm wall, and a plane for the top of the arm rest. Now that I've established those, I've got another layout representing what the shape of the seat back is when viewed from the front. My front layout, I'm not even going to bother with the shape of the seat pan because that's a bad direction to look at the seat pan from. So I'm just going to worry about the seat back area. And let me tweak this a little bit. So I've got several lines going here. These outer lines represent the outer shape of the seat back, and then I've put in a little radius, or actually a rather large radius here. And then this second line here represents where the surface is going to be trimmed so that we can later on add in our lip up at the upper edge here. Now I was trying to save time for this video, so I just made this a simple arc, this is a simple arc, and this is a simple arc. You should really draw these as probably as splines so that you get a much more smooth transition from the vertical to the horizontal. You'll see in my final result that because I used a lot of arcs, the chair doesn't look quite right. I'll also point out that this horizontal line represents where the lip is going to blend back into the main seat back. And I've made the blend a little bit higher than the armrest. In reality, the blend actually blends a little bit into the notch at the armrest, but that's a bit more complicated, so we're kind of simplifying this a little bit. Our next sketch is the top layout. I'm not bothering with the top view of the seat back, just the top of the seat pan. And what we've got here is the shape of the seat pan on the front edge, and again a big fillet here in the corner. Again, I'm using simple curves, and again I think you're going to want to use splines. And then these lines represent where the transition from the lip to the main part of the pan is going to occur. This line represents the shape of the seat back and the side arm wall that's going to wrap around to the side. And what I had to do here was imagine a wall that came all the way forward and came off of the edge of the seat pan. So the wall doesn't really go this far in real life, and it runs off of the seat pan right about here, about 5 inches forward of where the seat back is. I made this very curved. I think in real life it might be a little flatter through here, then gets very curvy, and then would get flatter again. So that's something you're going to have to play with. And I made, let's look directly at that sketch. I had to make a point that this would control where the spline crosses over the seat pan. And I had to really guess more or less where the tip of this imaginary wall was going to end up. I also have a cross-section sketch for the seat pan. This is the upward curvature of the seat pan, right about at the center line of the chair. And what I'm going to be doing is sweeping, or not sweeping, but making a big boundary that will start at the seat back and wrap around to become the arm wall. And this is in my imagination, what that arm wall would look like as it wraps to the front. The side view, this is really curving back on itself a lot, but if you look at the real chair, by the time it gets into the arm area, it just has a very gentle outward curve. This is the kind of thing that you're going to have to keep tweaking a little bit until you get the seat looking right. This is just a simple arc, and that's probably just fine. And by having this dimensioned, you'll be able to keep tweaking the chair until you're happy with the final result. Finally, I have a sketch here for the path of that wrapping around back / sidewall. Maybe I could have pulled this out a little farther, I don't know. Alright, so now we're going to move on to making the basic bucket. The basic bucket is going to look like this when we're done. The seat back / arm wall, the big blending fillet, and the seat pan itself. And you notice that the seat back doesn't have any kind of curve here yet, and neither does the seat pan. But what we do have is this notch here between the back and the armrest area. So let's roll that back. So what I've done here is copied this from this seat back from the side layout. I copied that wall front layout, copied this path down here and this path up here, and then made a boundary that then transitions from having a very radical backwards curve at the seat back to a very gentle outward curve at the front of the wall. The seat pan is a simple boundary that is just using this curve copied from the side view and this curve copied from the profile. What I did was, when I copied this particular sketch, I purposely stretched it out so that it would extend out farther than this surface here, so that when I trim them, I'll have a good clean trim. You see these both meet at the same forward edge, and then when I do a mutual trim on them, I get that. The next step is very simple. It's just a big fillet. This is a fillet using the curvature or constant curvature option so that we have a good blend there. We turn on curvature. You see that these blend together at the join lines without having a harsh change in the curvature from one surface to the other. In real life, I think what should happen here is this probably needs to be a variable radius. I made it a constant radius. I think it needs to be about a 5-inch radius back here and transition in front to more like a 3-inch radius. When I tried to do that earlier, that gave me some problems later on, which I'll describe when we get there. Before I went any further, I added some important planes. Added an angled rear plane that's angled about 45 degrees with respect to the chair. And I also added an angled bottom plane, and it'll soon be clear why I have these sketch planes. In order to create these planes, I had to create some locating sketches ahead of time. The reason I did this was because I want to be able to trim these walls in such a way that I'm left with the shape of the arm being carved out of this basic bucket, as opposed to trying to glue the arm onto the chair after the fact. Some students in the past have tried to make a basic chair and then add the arm in this area, and it just never blended in very well. So the arm has to come out of the basic surface that's already here. What I've done is copied from my front layout just this one outside edge that represents the seat back. And I've projected it onto the surface of the back here. I've then gone into the side view and projected from the side view layout the shape of the arm onto these surfaces. I probably only needed to project it onto this surface and not on the fillet, but that's not a big deal. Now the reason I'm doing all this is because, as you know, there's a little notch here that transitions from the seat back to the arm area. That notch isn't very easy to look at from directly from the side or directly from the back. It actually gives you a much more direct view if you look at that notch at a 45-degree angle. So now that we know what the shape of the chair looks like due to these projected sketches, what we're going to do is look at the chair from this angle, copy these projected lines into an angled sketch plane, and then draw by hand that notch that we're going to be looking more or less directly at. So let's see how that looks. So on that angled plane, I've copied this line that was projected onto the surface. I copied the line of the top of the armrest, it just stretched it off of the surface, and then I've gone and drawn in this spline that represents the notch. Maybe I can tweak that a little bit. So it looks kind of like a parabola or half of an oval. So this is going tangent to this edge here, and it's just intersecting this point on my copied armrest line. So what that allows us to do now is from this direction trim out the entire area that represents the border of the seat back and the border of the armrest. And this is a good angle to do it from because you can clearly see both the back and the armrest at the same time. You probably could have gotten away with trimming it from this direction, but you see from this direction this notch looks a little funny, and if we try to trim everything from the direct back direction, the notch looks a little bit pinched also. So this probably wasn't absolutely necessary to do it this way, but I think it just helps you get this shape a little better. And you might find on future projects you work on that this trick will be helpful. Now we need to do the same thing to trim out this area to give us the rest of the removed material that will give us the freestanding arm wall. And what we're going to do is then project one more line. This is the shape of the seat pan projected onto the fillet area. And then we're going to utilize that angled plane down here, copy everything into that plane, and we're going to draw in by hand a nice transitional spline from this line to this line, and then trim all this away. Let's just show you how that looks. So I've copied this line into my angled sketch, I've copied this line in, and I stretched it out a little bit so that it goes off the edge of the chair. And then I just drew, let's look at this directly. There we are. I then drew in a nice spline that I decided to just have it end right here between the transition, and I dragged this line back a little bit to here. This is, I don't know, 2 or 3 inches from here to here. You just got a nice looking spline, and by drawing it from this angle it should look good from all kinds of different angles that when we look at the chair. So you can see how this is going to trim in this 45-degree angle. So we finished that, and we've used that in a trim command using the standard trim. And now you can see how that area looks in here. That looks pretty good from just about any angle you look at it from. If I tried to trim it directly from this angle, I don't know if I would have gotten this curve looking very good, or especially if I tried to trim it from this angle, I know that this would not have looked very good at all. The only thing that maybe looks a little funny is when we look at it from the front. We see this little bit of a wobble as it arcs along the curve of the surface here, and then before it transitions into this portion here. I think the reason for that is that I used a constant fillet all the way wrapping around here. In real life, this fillet should probably get a little bit smaller and get down to about here, so that when this trim is put in, I don't think you'd see as much of this wobbled area. But we're just going to have to accept that for now. The next phase is to add the lip in the seat pan area. And the lip normally on the real chair actually doesn't fade out until it's wrapped all the way up to about here where this big notch ends. That's a really, it's not impossible of course, but it's a lot of extra work in Solidworks. And so as a compromise to get through this project, what we're going to do is have the lip fade out just before this edge starts curling upward. So it's going to be a little bit of inaccuracy, but it's not going to look too bad. This is what the lip is going to look like when we're done. It's a boundary surface. You can see how it ends just forward of this edge here. And rolling back, what we first do is use our top layout sketch to trim away a lot of our seat pan. So that's this line here, curving, big radius, and then curving forward again. And that leaves us a zone that we can then build in our lip. The side view sketch shows us what the shape of the lip is going to be on the center line of the chair. But we also need to figure out what the shape of the lip is going to be on the outer perimeter. And this is something you're just going to have to partially do by hand with some tweaking. We're going to make a projected curve, and we're going to project two curves together. The first one will be the shape of the lip when viewed from the top, and that of course is just copied from the top view. This would look a lot better if this was just one nice smooth spline. And our other sketch we're going to project that with is going to be a sketch. It's going to connect to this edge from the side view, and it's just going to gently go down to this point in alignment with the center line of the lip cross section. When we do that, we get a perimeter. Let's hide this one here. We get a perimeter here for the lip that looks like this. And you'll probably find yourself playing around with the side view shape of this lip a little bit until you're happy with how this looks when you roll it around from different angles. The lip then is going to be a simple boundary, and I've purposely notched this out in this area so that I would have four edges to make the boundary instead of having to make something like a fill surface. I know from experience, since this is turning a corner, that I need to have another plane here with another cross section. So in order to put that plane in, I made a little locator sketch that's on about a 45-degree angle coming through here. That gives me my plane, and then to draw that sketch, let's just look at the sketch for that. I use the intersection curve of the seat pan and then attach to it a simple circular arc. You might want to make this a spline instead and make it equal curvature to the construction line, and that might give you a little bit more control over the shape here. Then the boundary is simply in direction 1 is going to be 3 cross sections, the one on the center line, this one on that new angle plane, and also the cut edge or trimmed edge of this big fillet here. And then the other two, and then in direction 2, we're going to utilize this edge of the seat pan and this projected curve that we created. We want to make this ideally equal curvature along this edge and equal curvature along this edge if we can. And then of course we need to make, if I can move this out of the way, we need to make this edge normal to profile because later on we're going to be mirroring the chair and we want the lip to blend to its mirrored twin. So that's not so bad. And I thought once I did the bottom lip that the top was going to be even easier, which didn't quite turn out to be the case. To create the lip for the seat back, we start out pretty much in the same way as we did for the seat pan. Rolling back here, we use the front layout sketch to trim back the seat along this tangent, what is a tangent or an equal curvature line where the lip is going to be attached. And so this is pretty much a straightforward operation. And then what we have to do is create the outer perimeter for the edge of the lip. So I thought I could easily do that by projecting two sketches together. I'd make a sketch of this outer perimeter here and another sketch connecting from here to here for the same outer perimeter but seen from the side view, and then project them together. And when I did that, it looked good from the front, and it looked good from the side, and it looked terrible from the top. And what happened was it wasn't really following the curve of the seat back when viewed from the top. It was sort of flattening out in a very strange and unattractive way. So I realized that what I was going to have to do in this case is make the top edge by projecting a top view of the top edge with a front view of the top edge, but I was going to make the more vertical portion of the edge by projecting a front view with a side view. So if we look at doing the top edge first, I had to copy just this portion from my front layout, and then project that with a new sketch that I drew that doesn't really appear anywhere in any of my layouts. And I just made an arc that looked approximately concentric to the arc of the chair when seen from the top. So I projected those together and got that portion of the lip which just looks like that. Let's hide this here. And then to get the more vertical part of the lip, I was able to project from the front view this portion of the seat back, again taken from my layout sketch. And then I had to draw a new sketch on the side view and I just drew a single spline tangent here, or equal curvature, going all the way up to this point here in my side view layout. So I had to do a lot of playing around with this shape until I was happy with the final shape of the lip once the boundary was made. That yielded this portion of the lip. And even though in my side view I drew it going all the way to the top, it's only going to go this far because that's as far as the front view sketch went. And it's always the shorter sketch that determines what the length of the total projected sketch is going to be. So I then took those two lines, copied them into a new sketch, a 3D sketch, and then drew in the transition in the corner here from the vertical to the horizontal, and I tried my best to get it to match up. Well, actually I didn't have anything to match up to in the side view, but I did try my best to get it to match up to the shape in the front view. And if I tried to get this curve to perfectly match up with my underlay layout in this view, it ended up looking really strange in the side view, and it didn't look very good when I rotated it into different other angles. So you have to kind of be willing to tweak this a little bit until you're happy with the entire shape of the lip. So now finally I was able to make the lip itself. So here's our perimeter. Let's hide some of these sketches we don't need. So we can see we've got the perimeter here, the outer perimeter, the inner perimeter here, and once again we want to have an extra plane out here at about a 45-degree angle. And I also wanted a little extra plane here too, so that I get kind of a convex lip going all the way to about here, and then it starts to fade out and actually becomes concave down here where it joins this edge. So to do that, once again, Made a little locating sketch that helps me locate my angle plane and the other plane that's going to sit farther down. There's the two planes made by utilizing that layout sketch. And then finally the seat boundary is made similar to the way the seat back boundary is similar to the one made at the seat pan. This cross section is copied from our side layout. This is a brand new cross section drawn in that's going tangent or equal curvature to an intersection curve on the seat back, turned into a construction line. And this one here, I sort of had to force a little bit of a bulge in there. This is actually a spline that I drew in, and it's just a very subtle forward bulge or convex surface. You don't want to overdo it or it starts to affect the shape of the boundary up in this area here. So there's our lip. You can see it's sort of curling back as it wraps around. And I'll mention that in real life, this lip goes all the way down into this notch area, and it's actually curling backwards all the way down into here. So it's actually convex all the way until it finally fades out in this area. But again, that was going to be a bit difficult to do, so I purposely had it fade out a little bit above the notch. About anywhere from 1/4 to 1/2 inch should be good. So we've got all of the hard stuff done here. Now we can just add the armrest, which is just a planar surface, which you can copy. I don't even know if I had a layout sketch for this, but if you did, you can just copy this from your layout sketch and include this edge here, make a planar surface. And now we are finally ready to knit all of this stuff together. So we're down to the home stretch here. So let me roll this back. We knit all this stuff together. Then I can put a fillet here, blending the armrest into the arm wall. And this again is a fillet that's equal curvature on both sides. And now I'm ready to thicken this. The thickness is about 0.16 inches is what I measure with calipers, and that's about 4 millimeters. And then we need to do something to guarantee that when we mirror this to the other side, that it will be able to merge with the original copy. And when you thicken things, a lot of times the surface on the mirror plane is not perfectly planar, and you try to mirror it and merge it together and it won't do it. The trick I use to make sure that this is a planar surface here is I shave a little bit of material away using a sketch, and I just draw a line about 0.01 inches away from the mirror plane, which so I can just dimension this with respect to the origin going to the right. And when we shave that off, we get just a little bit of material removed, and that makes this one nice flat surface. The trouble is that surface is not on the mirror plane anymore, so if we mirror this, there would be a gap between the original and the mirrored copy. So then we use the Move Face command. That's under your Surfaces tab. And if you don't have it, just search for it up here using the command search and drag it onto your command manager. And then all you have to do is use the offset option and tell it you want to move that surface over 0.01 inches. So we're going to move it back the amount that we shaved off, and that brings that surface right onto the mirror plane. So we've got that. Now we're just down to a few more items, adding some fillets on the corners of the armrest, adding a fillet to the top edge, and adding a fillet to the bottom edge. The bottom edge, I had to click on more than one edge in order to get the tangent propagation to work. That might happen to you as well. And then now, because we did that trick by shaving and moving over the surface at the mirror plane, we should be able to mirror this using the merge option. And there's our chair. And I'll go ahead and turn off all of the tangent lines. And what should happen is that when you say hide tangent lines, you better not see any dark black lines anywhere on any of these surfaces. If you do, it means that you have some surfaces that are not tangent to each other. So again, some of the dimensions are way off on this chair, but it still looks pretty much the way a node chair would look. And once again, you can kind of see when you get funny off angle here that this curve doesn't look all that great because of the fact that I just used a simple round curve in my layout. So if this was a nice smooth spline, I think this would look better, and this area here would probably look better as well. The lip would look a little better if it did come down into here like real life. Similarly, if it wrapped all the way up into here before it faded away. But again, I think that is just getting into too much work. You'll also notice that you can kind of see a little bit of a shadow here where we transition from the lip to the seat back. If you look at the real chair, you can kind of see that too. But I think that maybe if another cross-sectional sketch was added, or maybe if splines were used here that were equal curvature, that might help get rid of some of that shadow. Same thing going on down here as well. One thing I'll point out is that when I made this a variable radius, and then I trimmed, let's get the tangent edges back on, and then when I trimmed away this area to make the lip, I could not get the lip to adhere to this edge. I kept getting an error. So there's something about this being a variable radius messing up this edge here, and Solidworks didn't like it, which is why I end up going with a constant radius. See if you can get this variable radius to work, and hopefully you won't have the problem I had trimming this. I really don't know what was causing that problem. So here we are. Just look at this from the side for a moment. That looks pretty close to what a real chair would look like with all the caveats I mentioned. Looks a little funny in the lip here, but oh well. And from this angle, it looks quite good. I think if you pick your views carefully when you render this, it's actually going to look quite nice. That's the end of the tutorial, and best of luck.